Hello, friends. Today we're going to talk about Stoicism and how this philosophical approach can help us recognize relationships where we're being used. Let's look at 7 traits of a person who only uses you. Emotional stability. In Stoicism, emotional stability means maintaining calm and clarity of mind in difficult situations. Stoics call for a conscious distinction between what we can control and what is beyond our influence. In everyday life, this translates into avoiding instant reactions to external stimuli and instead thinking about the situation before responding. Instead of reacting emotionally to difficulties or irritations, it is worth focusing on what depends on us. This allows you to manage your reactions more intelligently. Avoiding unreasonable emotional reactions helps to distinguish between changeable and unchangeable circumstances. Focusing on your reactions, rather than on external events, contributes to emotional stability. Let's say you have a conflict at work. An emotionally unstable reaction may include instant anger or an aggressive response. However, the Stoic approach involves a temporary pause to reflect on the situation and determine what depends on you. Perhaps changing your own attitude to the conflict and calm discussion will be more effective than giving in to emotions. Stoicism teaches us to see emotions not as enemies, but as part of human experience. It is important to understand that emotions are not bad in themselves, but it is our reactions to them that can affect our well-being and relationships. Stoics call for awareness and control over their inner world, which helps to avoid excessive reactivity and makes it possible to make decisions based on reason, not emotions. In real life, this means that in difficult situations we can pause before expressing our opinion or making any decisions. We can ask ourselves, what exactly can I control in this situation, and what is beyond my influence? For example, if we have a conflict with a colleague at work, we can reconsider our attitude to this situation. We cannot change other people's behavior, but we can control our own reactions and choose more constructive ways to resolve the conflict. Thus, emotional stability in Stoicism is not resistance to feelings, but flexibility and reasonable management of them in order to better self-understanding and relationships with others. Indifference to external circumstances. Stoics argue that our inner harmony should not depend on the fluctuations of the outside world. Let me tell you how this can transform our relationship. In life, like a dance with a changeable wind, we have to face external circumstances, financial difficulties, unexpected turns of fate, and often unpredictable changes in work or personal life. And that's where Stoicism comes to the rescue. Indifference to external circumstances is not cold indifference, but rather a wise and calm attitude towards what is beyond our control. It's like being freed from the shackles of the influence of external events on our inner state. Stoics teach us to focus on what we can change our reactions to the world around us. After all, when we stop controlling those things that are not amenable to our influence anyway, we free our mind and emotions. It's like getting rid of a heavy load that we're carrying for nothing. In everyday life, this means that we can look at events around us from the position of a calm observer. We can choose our reactions without succumbing to the whirlwind of external events. This approach not only helps to strengthen our emotional stability, but also reduces the level of conflict in our relationship. So, the second feature of Stoicism, indifference to external circumstances, is not just a philosophical statement, but a practical approach that helps us to remain steadfast and wise in the face of unpredictable changes in life. Lack of reciprocity. This trait concerns relationships and our ability to balance them. Let's look at how the Stoics approached this aspect and how we can use their principles in everyday life. In life, we often put a lot of energy into relationships, expecting reciprocity. It can be in friendship, love, or a professional relationship. Stoics teach us to let go of expectations and value relationships not for reciprocity, but for the very act of giving and supporting. The lack of reciprocity in Stoicism does not mean ignoring justice or constantly giving without receiving. Rather, it is a call not to make our emotional stability dependent on how others perceive us. The Stoics believe that if we give something kind or support someone without expecting an indispensable reciprocal gesture, we are freed from emotional fluctuations associated with expectations. In everyday life, this means that we can value our relationships by doing good deeds and supporting others, regardless of whether these efforts are reciprocated or not. This does not mean suppressing your own needs, but on the contrary, allows you to build healthier and more conscious relationships. Thus, the lack of reciprocity in Stoicism is a challenge to a deeper and more selfless relationship based on self-sufficiency and the ability to love and support without expecting an indispensable reciprocal gesture. Avoiding obligations. In our society, commitment, whether in relationships, work, or social activities, is often seen as a sign of responsibility and reliability. However, Stoics suggest getting rid of rigid and unrealistic obligations that can be a source of anxiety and stress. Avoiding obligations in Stoicism does not mean a complete lack of responsibility or unwillingness to interact with the world. Rather, Stoics call for a more flexible and reasonable approach to commitment. In everyday life, this can manifest itself in the fact that we try to be honest with ourselves about our capabilities and resources. Sometimes, because of our ambitions, we take on too much, which can eventually lead to stress and disappointment. Stoics suggest evaluating your obligations reasonably and being open to reviewing them in the light of the current situation. Avoiding unnecessary obligations can also mean freeing ourselves from the idea that we owe something or someone if circumstances change. Instead of feeling constrained by commitments, we can approach them more flexibly and adapt to changes. Thus, Stoicism encourages us to be more reasonable in making commitments, try not to take on too much, and, if necessary, flexibly review our commitments in order to maintain internal stability and emotional well-being. Something unique happens when we look at the idea of avoiding unnecessary obligations in the light of Stoicism. At first glance, commitments seem to be an integral part of our daily lives, and avoiding them can cause doubts and even fear. However, the Stoics teach us that flexibility in commitment is not only reasonable, but also contributes to our inner peace. Sometimes, in pursuit of success and recognition, we take on more than we can actually handle. Stoicism suggests that we make commitments based on the realities of our lives and our own capabilities. This is not a denial of responsibility, but rather a liberation from the illusion of complete control over everything. Avoiding unnecessary obligations in Stoicism is also associated with understanding the variability of life. Stoics argue that we cannot always predict the future, and therefore it is important to remain flexible in our commitments. This is not frivolity, but the desire to accept life changes with wisdom and calmness. In everyday life, this can be expressed in the fact that we look at our schedule and commitments from a realistic perspective. We set goals based on our real capabilities, which avoids overloads and reduces stress levels. The constant need for your help. Let's move on to consider the following feature: the constant need for your help. This is an aspect that the Stoics saw as an obstacle to inner freedom and emotional peace. Let's look at how this principle can be interpreted and applied in a modern context. Stoics urge us to avoid constant dependence on other people's help if it becomes a source of our emotional stability. They suggest striving for independence and inner strength in order not to succumb to the constant need for support. In everyday life, this means that we must be able to solve our problems and find internal resources to overcome difficulties without always turning to others for help. This is not a denial of the importance of supporting others, but rather a call to develop one's own resilience and determination. The constant need for someone else's help, from the point of view of Stoicism, can become an obstacle to our inner development. When we always rely on others, we may miss the opportunity to strengthen our own problem-solving and self-reliance skills. This principle also applies to our emotional well-being. Stoics believe that if we are always dependent on external sources for support, we leave our emotional stability at risk. Instead, they encourage us to develop the ability to cope with emotions and strive for inner stability. Thus, in the light of Stoicism, The constant need for someone else's help can hinder our inner development and emotional balance. Stoics suggest finding a balance between supporting others and developing one's own resilience. Lack of sincerity in communication. This trait of Stoicism calls us to be honest in our relationships, to abandon false masks, and to maintain authenticity in communicating with others. Let's talk about how the Stoics perceive this aspect and how it can be applied in a modern context. Sincerity in communication, according to Stoicism, is the key to a healthy and conscious relationship. Stoics urge us to be open and honest, both with ourselves and with others. This is not only a way to maintain internal honesty, but also to promote the development of high-quality relationships. In everyday life, this means that we try to express our feelings and opinions sincerely and openly, even if they may be difficult. Stoics teach us to avoid facades and masks, giving others the opportunity to see us as we are. Lack of sincerity in communication can lead to a variety of problems, such as misunderstandings, conflicts, and loss of trust. The Stoics urge us to ensure that our communication is genuine, based on true feelings and intentions. Sincerity also plays an important role in our inner world. Stoics believe that honest and open communication helps us to better understand ourselves, which in turn contributes to our inner stability. Thus, in the context of Stoicism, the lack of sincerity in communication is seen as an obstacle to healthy relationships and inner resilience. This principle emphasizes the importance of being honest and authentic, both in dealing with others and in dealing with ourselves. The inability to change behavior. Let's analyze the following feature: the impossibility of changing behavior. Stoicism, in fact, offers the opposite view of this issue, encouraging us to constantly improve ourselves and be ready for change. Let's look at how this aspect can be understood in Stoic philosophy and how we can apply it in our lives. For Stoics, constant development and change for the better are an integral part of life. They believe that we should be ready to correct our actions and views in accordance with the changing environment. Stoicism calls us to be flexible in learning from experience and to constantly improve ourselves. In everyday life, this means that we must be open to changes in our behavior and thinking. Stoics emphasize the importance of introspection and willingness to correct mistakes. The inability to change behavior, from the point of view of Stoicism, can create obstacles to our inner growth. Stoics teach us to view change and challenges as opportunities for improvement. Instead of carefully adhering to established habits and beliefs, they encourage us to respond openly to new circumstances, ready to change our actions and views. This principle is also related to the concept of adaptation. Stoics believe that the ability to adapt to changing circumstances is the key to survival and well-being. Thus, the inability to change behavior can become an obstacle to our personal growth and emotional resilience. As a result, within the framework of Stoicism, the willingness to change one's behavior in response to new conditions and experiences is considered an integral part of maturity and wisdom. This opens the door for us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and to continuous improvement. In everyday life, this means that we must maintain an openness to feedback and a willingness to adapt to changes in ourselves and around us. Stoics teach us that change is necessary for our growth, and that abandoning it can lead to stagnation and the loss of opportunities for personal improvement. The inability to change behavior can also lead to rigidity in attitudes and attitudes. Stoics urge us to be prepared to reconsider our beliefs in the light of new data and experience, thus maintaining flexibility of thinking. Stoics emphasize the importance of self-understanding and self-control. Rejecting the possibility of changing behavior can become an obstacle to being aware of your strengths and weaknesses, as well as an obstacle to self-improvement. So, in the context of Stoicism, the willingness to change our behavior is seen as a force that allows us to develop and become wiser and more flexible in our approach to life. This principle emphasizes the need for constant self-improvement and willingness to adapt, which can eventually lead to a more balanced and conscious life.